All right, hello everybody. Today we're going to take a look at Unit 7, Topic 7, changes as a result of the world economy. Okay, so you're going to see changes. I'm going to show you worldwide ones and some that are happening right underneath our nose here in St. Louis that we're not even aware of, and I think is going to really affect your guys' life in the next 10 years. You'll be a part of this, if not in St. Louis, but somewhere. Okay, so we're going to explain causes and geographic consequences of recent economic changes, such as the increase in international trade. You guys know that as globalization, deindustrialization. So countries like America, we've deindustrialized, right? Like the first part, unit or 7, topic 1 was about industrialization. Well, this in America, we're experiencing deindustrialization. So like where the Rust Belt is, and the northeastern part, like Cleveland and Sandusky, Ohio, and even like parts of Chicago and Erie, Pennsylvania, they've been deindustrialized. Detroit, and now this growing interdependence of the world economy, we've moved past industrialization and we're doing other jobs besides that now. So, okay, essential knowledge. Outsourcing and economic restructuring have led to a decline in jobs in core regions, a decline in manufacturing jobs, and an increase in jobs in newly industrialized countries. And you guys know, and I know that as like our clothes, because our jobs, clothes used to be made here are now made overseas because the labor is cheaper, as we've talked about numerous times. Outside of the core, so the periphery and semi-periphery, the growth of industry has resulted in the creation of new manufacturing zones, including places called special economic zones, free trade zones, and export processing zones. We also have those here, okay? And an emergence of an international division of labor, okay, which is developing. The developing world is seeing higher paying jobs as a result of this. All right, outsourcing. Sometimes I'll call somewhere for customer service, right? And that customer service person speaks English, but they don't speak English like you and I do. Okay, and they may speak English like some of our students here at Bevel East who are immigrants or their parents are immigrants. And we can understand them, but it's a little bit more difficult to understand them than it would be you and I having a conversation. Okay, some of you may even have relatives that are that way. And that's fine. That's part of being an American. But what these companies have done is they've outsourced their call centers outside of the United States because they say, well, if we start a call center and put it in Belleville, we're going to have to pay somebody $14 an hour to work them. And they have these. Like those exist. My sister-in-law was just looking for people to do those types of jobs in like Mascoutah. So they do exist, but if you have to pay an American worker $14 an hour and you can pay somebody overseas $6 an hour and all they have to do is answer the phone, I mean, there's not even any shipping costs. You just got to hook up the tech. Because we live in such a globalized, connected world, it's way cheaper, right? So they move these jobs overseas, right? Countries where jobs are being outsourced, and you can see places like India, 35%. There's a large percentage of people in India that speak English because of colonialization. Okay, Great Britain colonized India. And so there are literally tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, of people in India that can speak English. And so you call India and they speak English and they can handle whatever customer service problem or issue that you have with them. So that's outsourcing. You're taking the jobs that used to be in a core country and you're moving them out. And that's the same thing's happening with like the textile industry and the clothes that are made. Okay, Bangladesh is something we always talk about all the time, right? Our textile jobs, our clothing jobs, the shoe manufacturer, jobs that used to be in the United States, now they're in Malaysia, right? We don't do them here anymore. The jobs making Maytag laundry equipment or Maytag or GE refrigerators, okay, and dishwashers and all that, well, those are moved to Mexico, okay? And so those jobs that we used to have here in towns like Galesburg, Illinois, okay, or towns like Rantoul, Illinois, and they used to be a factory town. Well, those factories are gone. They're abandoned, and now they're in Mexico because that's outsourcing or sending their jobs somewhere else. Okay, so that's part of this economic restructuring. So core countries like the United States, jobs shift from secondary. We don't have nearly as many secondary jobs as we used to. Okay, and people find other jobs. They have to. So they find them in tertiary places. They find them in quaternary places, maybe if they get more education. Okay, so you lose manufacturing jobs where you make stuff so that those people find new jobs in the service industry or quaternary or quinary jobs. Loss of jobs in the core country, but it's loss of jobs in manufacturing in the core countries, but there's a growth of jobs in the periphery countries. We still have a demand for all those products. They're just being produced overseas. Okay. And that's not all bad. We lose those jobs in the United States, but that means for you and I that the cost of our clothing and whatever it is we purchase, even if it's a car or a Maytag, dishwasher or washer and dryer, like they're cheaper because we don't have to pay the cost of the companies don't have to pay the cost of labor. Okay, but that means Americans are losing jobs. Okay, MITB nations. Okay, these are kind of like the, and one of them is the same, but they're kind of like the BRICM countries or the McRib countries, right? So they're high manufacturing countries. Okay, so are these the new China, right? Are they becoming a manufacturing powerhouse? Will they move to the next level on Rostow's model? Okay, like the 4 Asian tigers. I'll get to them in just a minute. Okay, so what's happening in these places? Okay, Malaysia, India, Thailand, Indonesia, even the BRICM countries. Okay, and those are just acronyms of how to remember some of the names of places that are in the semi-periphery, right? So, or maybe these are even in the periphery countries. Those countries are experiencing the Industrial Revolution. So now they're becoming more urbanized. People are moving to the cities. Now you're getting the multiplier effect because you have a factory that employs 300 people, like the city that you guys put together, right? You had the factories. Well, you had to have people deliver on the factories, so you had to improve the housing. So you improve the housing, and now those people need to eat. So you got to have a grocery store. You got to have restaurants. That's the multiplier effect. Okay, so you're creating all these new jobs in those countries, and that's a good thing. Okay, now the 4 Asian tigers used to be these industrializing countries. Okay, used to be when I was a kid, Taiwan, like it seemed like everything was made in Taiwan. Toys, cheap toys, clothes, everything, right? Singapore was another one. Hong Kong, made in Hong Kong was another one. Hong Kong's now a part of China. Okay, and South Korea was another place, right? Well, those 4 places have done what we've done. They've moved past the manufacturing. The people in Taiwan, the workers in Singapore, and there are millions of them in Hong Kong and South Korea, they're not going to work these manufacturing jobs, okay? Because the companies, the multinational companies that own those factories, they're not going to pay those workers. They don't want to pay them $14 an hour. They want to pay them $4 an hour. And so the multinational company says, okay, great. We're not going to have it in Singapore anymore. The people here won't work for that cost. Fine. Then we'll move the factory to Bangladesh. And that's what they do. So they move the factory to, Malaysia, or they move to India or Thailand, right? Made in Thailand. Okay. So what'll happen in the next 30 years is 40 years, the people in these countries, they'll do the same thing. They'll get together, they'll unionize, they'll demand more money, they'll demand more wages. The international community will push, okay, for them to get better treatment. And then they'll become like these 4 Asian tigers, maybe. Okay, so there's a lot of factors that go into it, but the 4 Asian tigers used to be in the situation of these countries. Okay, so what happens to the MDCs? What happens to America? What happens to Western Europe? Okay, what happens to Japan when this happens? Well, they have less industry jobs. Okay, when that happens, you see things like this. Okay, you see urban decay. And if you guys drive through downtown St. Louis, you go through North City. Okay, if you've ever been to Crown Candy, there are places that look like this. It's not quite this bad. This was taken from Detroit. Okay, this happens. Okay, that's urban decay. People have left, and so nobody lives there. So you see that from the Rust Belt. Okay, people moving from the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt. Okay, so people realize there's no jobs left in Cleveland, so I'm moving to Scottsdale. Okay, Arizona, because there's going to be jobs there, and there's other things that I can do. Maybe they're in the service industry, maybe they're quaternary, right? But people are looking to move to get out of those places. All right, so what happens in the LDCs? Okay, there's more urbanization. They're going through the Industrial Revolution. If you think of that process and what happens, okay, and there's a multiplier effect, like I mentioned earlier. The problem is in those countries, there's no labor laws. Okay. And so that's really tough on the workers. They're working for not very much money. Okay. But with a multiplier effect, with the new jobs that are available now, and with the more money that the countries have, if the country does things correctly and they have a stable government, there's no civil wars, then they take their money, they invest in the schools, the kids go to school, the girls go to school. Like we talked in the last section, the kids become more educated. Well, that next group of kids that becomes more educated, they're going to be looking for different kinds of jobs. okay, than the manufacturing jobs. Okay, they go through the same process that we've gone through. Okay, and they're going to move up on Rostov's scale as time goes. All right, so in those countries, there are things developed to help them. Okay, what's happened is across the world, all these different places are like, all right. And we talked neoliberalism. I don't know if you guys have seen that one yet, but basically what that means is we're getting rid of communism and we want everybody to be open and be able to trade with each other so that we can help each other out. Okay, so a special economic zone, an SEZ, okay, is an area of the country where businesses and trade laws are different from other areas of the country. So you might have trade laws from a country where, Guatemala has a tax if they trade with Cuba. Okay, but if you have a little zone in Guatemala that has free trade, then you can put things out through that city, through that exporting area. Okay, and then you don't have those taxes. So then what that does is increase your trade. So then the question you're probably asking is, why don't you just make the entire country free trade? Okay, well, they do that. Okay, so between Mexico, the United States, and Canada, that's that free trade agreement. Okay, the European Union does the same thing, right? So you get rid of those. You don't necessarily have to have the zones. Now, zones can also be there so that the government can focus on that specific area of the country to develop an area. Okay, so this is a great example. These are those maquiladores that I've talked about numerous times. You can see all these cities, and maybe you've heard of Monterrey. Okay, you may have heard of Nuevo Laredo. Okay, you may have heard of Tijuana. Okay, these are our Ciudad Juarez is the one across from El Paso that I told you about with my cousin, right? These are all maquiladores, and I mean, 30 years ago, these places didn't have very many jobs. There's tons of jobs there now. Okay, the problem that Mexico has is when you get to the stable government part, okay, are they providing schools in these places? Do they have good enough housing? Okay, is there health care there that will allow these people to maintain a healthy lifestyle, right? Provide for their kids and their families, right? So there's a lot of things to go with this, but the jobs are definitely moving there to not only Mexico, but to other countries. Remember, the BRICS would all be in there: Brazil, Russia, India, China. Okay, and then you develop that middle class with that process. Okay, free trade zones are the same. It's an airport or a seaport where goods can be landed and they can be stored and they can be redistributed, okay, in a break of bulk center. So we have one of those real close to here, okay, in Granite City. So the chain of rocks, if you see that body of water that goes up there, that's a canal. You can see the barge on that canal. Okay, so this is a free trade zone and it's here. So we can ship stuff here. It can go international. It can go all over the world. Okay, and this is we're going to also come in here, right? So this is part of the reason why there's Amazon distributorships up off of Interstate 270. Those are within miles of this place. Okay, so those goods can all be shipped into here. You can take them off, break a bulk, boom, send them across, okay, via truck to those Amazon centers, and then they can send them out all across the country. Okay, that's the idea here. You can do that without any taxes, and that increases trade. That's a good thing, okay, for everybody. So if you've ever been to the Grizzlies ballpark in Sojay, you'll see one of these down in Sojay. It's an export processing zone. So these are developed for things strictly for manufacturing export. So down there in Sojay, they have these huge containers are everywhere. They're all over the place. And they're right as you go into the stadium, you can see them off to the right. It's the same idea, right? It's an export processing zone. They don't necessarily make the stuff in Sojay. They do some, but they make things, they ship them to Sojay, and then they send them out, okay, via truck to that export center in Granite City, or they'll send them on the river, okay, down to the Gulf of Mexico. All right, so International Division of Labor, I've kind of mentioned this already. Because of globalization, because of new trade laws, all right, you shift from manufacturing jobs in core countries, developed countries like the United States, to developing countries around the world. Okay, the companies, the multinational MNC, multinational companies, they love this because they get a low cost of production. It makes them more money. Okay, instead of paying $14 an hour plus benefits or $22 an hour plus benefits, they're paying $5 an hour plus benefits or no benefits at all. So their profits skyrocket. They love it. Now they got to pay for the transportation, but they really love it. Okay, all right. So your smartphone. Okay, you talk about international. Okay, the idea was they came up with it, Steve Jobs and Apple came up with it in the United States. Okay. The glass is made in the United States. The cobalt that's used for the inner parts of it are produced in the Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, okay, which has helped them tremendously, right? But that's a commodity for them, and so they're commodity dependent on that. Right now, that's great. Okay, the memory chips come from Japan and South Korea, the Asian tigers. Okay, the cameras are made in Japan. The accelerometers, which allows you to have the compass and all the other things on your phone, those are made in Germany. The gyroscopes are made in Switzerland. The phone itself is put together in China and now in India. Okay, I mean, and that's for a phone. Okay, that's crazy that all that stuff comes from all over the world like that, right? It's no wonder that it costs what it does. Okay, so other things here, we talk about industry. There are something called Fordist methods, and that's named after Henry Ford. Okay, and this comes from the mass production of cars, right? So like you guys know, it looks like this. Okay, so that's an assembly line, right? You produce tons of cars. It doesn't have to be cars. It could be anything. Okay, but that's a assembly line, mass production. That's Fordist. Post-Fordist is when you have robots and animation. Okay, things are more digital. There's 3D printing that produces products, right? This is a post-Fordist assembly line, right? There's no people working on this. It's all robots. Okay, now we talk about things like 3D printing. I have a former student that's what he's done now, and I don't know how much money he's making, but he's making a lot because he can operate a 3D printer. He can produce all this stuff. He went to a school in Indiana. It was like a 2-year apprentice program that he's killing it. I'd love to see what he's doing now. He was so happy when this happened. It's a new type job, right? It's a post-Fordist job that he has. Okay, multiplier effect I've mentioned numerous times. Okay, this is additional economic opportunities that arise with new industrialism. So, you got to have grocery stores, you got to have restaurants, you got to have a hospital, you got to have schools, right? So you need teachers and doctors and nurses, right? So the workers have more money to spend. So you might have more shopping areas. Okay, this is a good thing for the economy. It's like when you built your city after the factories, then there's a pub, right? Then you got to have a church, and then you got to have the shopping district. So there's all kinds of jobs that come with that multiplier effect. This is a good thing for those less developed countries. Okay, all right, economies of scale. This is mass production. You make it more efficient. Okay, which means you get more profit. So McDonald's, if you ever seen the movie The Founder, there's great scenes in here about like what he did to make the production of the hamburger so much easier. Okay, and that's why when you go to McDonald's, man, and now we got fast food, all these places, whether it's Culver's or Raising Cane's or whatever, you can go through and say, give me number 6. And so they got a whole process that starts at number 6. If you go to Chick-fil-A, man, they are on it. Their economies of scale are incredible. And you go through there and there's a 30-car line and boom, you're out of there in less than 10 minutes, right? They have the economies of scale down to a science. Popeyes, they're the other way around. Okay. They're not worried about economies of scale. If they were, they would change their process. They're worried about getting it right with their sandwich. And so it's the same for everybody all the time. Sometimes you go to Popeyes and you wait forever. Okay, because they don't have the economies of scale. I don't know why their business model doesn't want to look at that, but it doesn't. That's not how they operate. Okay, so that's a good Chick-fil-A is a great example of economies of scale. All right, agglomeration. This happens right down the street from us. Okay, the clustering of similar industries in the same area. Businesses share a labor pool and an infrastructure. Right down the street by the Walmart and by the Lowe's across the street from Swick. Okay, look at all those restaurants. I'm probably going to miss some. There's a Chick-fil-A. Okay, there's a Jimmy John's. There's a Hardee's. There's a Wendy's. There's a Chinese restaurant that's in there. And there might be a couple other ones. Like, I think all of those are right there. They share from the same labor pool. Okay, they're going to get kids like you maybe to work there. Okay, and they share an infrastructure. Heck, if you are ordering food from a trucking company or from a food company and they're going to deliver there, you could say, look, we got these 4 different restaurants here. We all want these fries and we want them delivered at this time. And that will reduce your costs because they don't have to make 4 trips. They can make 1 trip. Okay, so your costs go down. That might not happen in the fast food industry, but that definitely happens in industry. So here's an example. Boston, okay, is an agglomeration of places that are medicine, research, hospitals. There's universities nearby. Okay, so that draws all of those people to those places. Okay, I'll show you another example of that in just a minute. So Amazon, when they were looking to where to put their second headquarters instead of in Seattle, they were looking for places that had tons of universities because they needed educated people that graduated with degrees in logistics, that graduated with all kinds of different degrees to help Amazon. And so there were only a couple places in the country that could come up with enough graduates, right? Young people that had that that met that criteria that Amazon wanted, and they never even did it. The second place doesn't exist as far as I know. Okay, just-in-time delivery is just a term. Companies get those raw materials that they need. So if you're going to produce steel and you need so much coal, well, the companies don't want to pay to store the coal. So they want that coal delivered just in time for them to literally take it off the train and put it into the iron ore, to the melting machine and the smelting machine, and then just go and make it, right? So it literally comes off the truck, boom, right into the furnace, and they make the steel. Okay, they don't want to have to store their raw materials. They don't want to have to pay for the inventory. That's called just-in-time delivery. Okay, growth poles. All right, now I've been alluding to this all the way through this. So the definitions at the top: it's a concentration of highly innovative and tech-advanced industries. Other industries develop close by to help facilitate these industries, right? So it's a multiplier effect when this happens, right? One tech place will be like, oh, that's good. They're doing good. I'm going to go there. Okay, so you think of all the big tech companies in the United States: Google, eBay. You guys probably don't know what that is. Twitter. And I'm missing some. Facebook. They're all in the same place. Every one of them, they're all near San Francisco and like Santa Cruz, San Jose, right? There's a huge tech corridor out there, right? So what's happened out there is all these people that have those tech jobs, they move out there, and man, it has blown up in the last 20 years. The value of a house in a place like San Francisco, San Jose, Santa Cruz, man, I bet you they've tripled in the last 20 years. If you paid $200,000 for a house, now it's worth $600,000 because there's such demand that's been created. Okay, so this kind of same thing is other people have looked at it, and this really growth poles are really like on a national scale that countries will do this and try to. And America didn't do this; it happened naturally. But like in Brazil, there's a city called Manaus, and they made that a growth pole. It's way in the middle of the Amazon rainforest on the Amazon River, and they wanted everybody to move there, right? And it's kind of worked a little bit. Right. They did the same thing with their capital in Brazil. It's called Brasilia. They built it in 1960 and they tried to get people to move there. That really worked. Okay. And so much that it's become one huge city with Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo. But in St. Louis, they've done the same thing. Right. It's called the Cortex. And I was going to show you a video, but you can see it on this own feed if you want to do it. But high tech companies. Okay. So like Square, there's a Twitter in there. I think there's a Cash App place that's over there. Okay, BJC, so Barnes Jewish Christian Hospital in St. Louis. Okay, Washington University, which is an unbelievably huge employer in St. Louis. In fact, I think it employs the most people in St. Louis than any other employer. St. Louis University. All of these people took their stuff and said, okay, we're going to build in this area of the city. In the last 20 years, they've created 6,000 jobs. They've also created a multiplier effect because the neighborhoods around them, like if you've ever heard of the Grove, you've heard of Tower Grove, okay, you know where Forest Park is. Okay, so all of those things around it. If you've ever heard of something called the Foundry, which is new, it's like an open air, like food establishment with all these cool food places. They have live music. It's basically like an outdoor mall, but it has music and there's some shops and stuff, but it's all restaurants, right? So that's all happened, and it's here in St. Louis. Okay, so it's right along Interstate 64. It's right by IKEA. Okay, if you know where the IKEA is, there's a Metrolink stop there. And then they have all these businesses, right? It's right by St. Louis University. It's close to UMSL. Washington University's there. There's Barnes Jewish Hospital. Okay, and then down inside of there, okay, is where you got all these jobs. Well, they've created 6,000 jobs, but they've also created a huge demand for for living space. So apartments, condos, flats, living space for all these college kids. Okay. There's some cool coffee shops that are down there. There's a great donut shop down there called Vincent Van Donut. It's fantastic. And so all these places are blowing up over there because they focus this as a growth pole in St. Louis. So it's on a regional scale. It's on a city scale. It's not on a national scale like the one in San Jose, with the tech corridor out there. They're trying to do the same thing here in St. Louis, and it's working. Okay. My niece's husband is a real estate development guy, and he's like, oh my gosh, it's working big time. Okay. In fact, he added a few things that went with it. He sent me, I got to look at the text that he sent me. Let's see. So there's also something called the Greenway Plans and Projects. So the Greenway, and you see it if you go into St. Louis, they're old like railroad trusses and have bike trails on them. So they're making these walking paths and these bike trails to connect all of St. Louis. So it'll go from Forest Park, which is up there at the top of that. It'll wind through, this cortex. That's what it's called in St. Louis, this growth pole. It'll go through the cortex and it will take you all the way down to the arch. Okay. It will connect you with the bridges that will take you over to Illinois. Okay, so you can ride all over the place. This is also on Interstate 44 and Interstate 55 by Grant's Farm. Okay, so all of these things are interconnected. And this is more urban unit stuff, but it's a growth pole. It's a great example of it. Okay, so economic landscape has been transformed by post-Fordist methods of production. I showed you those. Multiplier effects, economies of scale, agglomeration, putting all those businesses. This is agglomeration too, because you've got Barnes Jewish, you got WashU, you got UMSL, SLU, you got all these different things that are all these different entities that are doing the same thing, healthcare and education, right? And they're all in the same place. So that's an agglomeration. Emergence of service sectors, which is what's happened in the more developed countries. Okay, there's high tech industries like Square in St. Louis. Okay, like Twitter. Okay, and then growth poles like I showed you with the cortex. Okay, all right. That brings us to the end of this. I get real excited about that one. I think that's a cool one. That Unit 7, Topic 7 has got some good stuff in it, right? And some local examples. And guys, I'm telling you, in the next 10 years, you guys are probably going to live in a growth pole part of a city, right, when you graduate from college. So, all right, I will stop right there, and we'll get to 7, 8, sustainable development tomorrow.